Hey folks, so I've mentioned this quite a few times in the past, but trying to get a no-hit Jevil run in Deltarune is something that I've been working on for literal years. Like, I don't even know, ever since the game first, I guess, came out, kind of was released as a demo, because that's still the state it's in. I've constantly been putting attempts into it, like every once in a while I just boot it up, play it, and then, I fail miserably and whatever. But about a week ago, I finally got an attempt where I only got hit once. And since that point, I've been putting in, I don't even know, in the last week I probably put in like over 100 attempts just in that time alone, trying to get the final run, and I've gotten so close over and over, and it just keeps failing. But today I finally did it, which is why you're seeing this video. Now, I should also note that while I technically do have my audio over the video, it's like so quiet because I didn't really mess with the sound settings a lot, so you can hear me, but you can barely hear me, so just, I guess, heads up on that. But anyways, here is No Hit Jevil. So, as it turns out, Deltarune is actually copy protected in terms of the music, so I can't actually show the real audio of the boss fight. I've been editing this video for a few hours, it's probably not going to upload when I planned, and well, I didn't want to leave this section completely devoid of any sort of commentary whatsoever, so here you go. Now, first few attacks, as you can see, pretty normal. This one you just kind of go around in a ring. This is the main attack, which, as I'm going to discuss later, can really fuck me up. This is, I just like to refer to it as the heart attack. And this thing is really frustrating. It's really hard to read the pattern on this, and it can really fuck you with some of those, like, cycles. Like, I got really fucking lucky on this one. I don't know how I managed to avoid it, but I did. Now, one of the main things about this boss is you obviously have those attacks down there when I do my damage, and I need to land that little line right in the little pip to actually deal the full amount of damage, and I need to ideally DPS Jevil down as much as possible. So there, I managed to get one slight miss and one perfect hit. And if I manage to get Jevil down really quickly, which I do in this kill, then I skip some of the later parts that are really, really challenging. So that overall makes the thing a bit easier. Now there I got two perfect hits. This is probably one of the other really hard attacks. He just fires off a bunch of like clubs from the suit of cards clubs right at you, and you have to really quickly react and avoid it. Nothing special there. It's just a matter of having really good reaction time. You might also notice that sometimes I'm using that magic spell on Susie. So because I'm not taking any damage, I have nothing else that I really need to spend my TP, which is my energy resource, on. So it's better to just funnel all of that into Susie's Rude Buster, which is just a very, very powerful attack. It's also worth noting that when you fire off a Rude Buster, if you press enter the moment it connects with Jevil, it deals bonus damage. So if it looks like my Rude Buster is doing a bit more damage than normal, that's why. You can get like a bit of a critical hit if you time the Rude Buster up right when it connects. This attack pattern is kind of weird. The hitboxes are a little bit janky, so sometimes you might see my heart pass over the duck, and it looks like, well, I should have been hit, but I don't know, the hitboxes are really inconsistent on that attack pattern. Spades is basically just the club's attack, but with a reskin, so this one can be kind of annoying, but overall, nothing too special. Now, the next one is where things get a little bit annoying. So I tend to fail a lot of my runs right here. This attack doesn't look hard, but you might notice that those little circles have a chance to randomly just spread out. And if you're not expecting that, it can catch you just unprepared, and it can really fuck you over. So this attack is interesting. It doesn't really do any damage, or it's not really a threat, but every single very close, like, parry, I guess, that you get with the projectile gives a ton of TP, so you can use that to farm out Rude Busters, which I actually missed on this kill. I forgot to use my Rude Buster. This is Jevil's Final Chaos. This is effectively his final ability, and I got a really close dodge there, and overall it's not too bad, but I've historically failed this a bunch. Now, this doesn't do any damage, it's just kind of like a cool animation, and here is the final attack. I'll cut back to my voice.
Yes! Oh, this took me 3 years.
Alright, now that that's out of the way, let's talk Jevil. for anybody who's watched my channel, you know that, I love boss fights. I love mythic rating in WoW. I love, little challenges like hard mode roguelikes and, stuff like this. So figuring out what makes a boss fight difficult and how all of its mechanics work is something really interesting to me. It may seem a bit silly to make a super critical analysis for a boss fight that's in a demo that's 3 years old, but hey, I've been playing this for years. It's something that I really enjoy. Despite being a demo, probably one of my favorite games of all time. It's just that fucking good. So I just want to talk about it for a bit. Now, Jevil is strange. He's kind of difficult, but difficult in a not great way, in my opinion. While I do like the boss is definitely tuned around being able to heal. Because a lot of the changes going from Undertale, which is the original game, to Deltarune involves having more, I guess, responsiveness within a fight. So now you have 3 characters instead of just, playing as one character, meaning you can kind of do attacks and heal at the same time. You can use items, you can cast spells. There's even this system that you'll probably notice throughout the fight where, if you're not familiar with Deltarune, the closer you get to a projectile, you have a chance to, if you get really close, get this tick of your energy resource, TP, which is that big bar on the side. So you can play really aggressively and get right next to a bullet's hitbox and get a little bit of extra energy for actually doing that. So the fight, in a sense, is kind of tuned around this. The attack patterns, while not necessarily easy, are also not super punishing because they don't outright one-shot you, or they don't put you at a point where you absolutely need to immediately heal. So the damage isn't super bad, meaning you're expected to get hit once or twice and then heal the damage back. So a lot of people I've seen have tried to compare Jevil to Sans. And Sans, if you're unaware, is the final boss of Undertale. And Sans is a notoriously difficult fight, especially if you're trying to no-hit it. It's not something I've done yet, but I have been working on it slowly over time. And Sans is interesting because overall, I would say Sans is a much harder fight. Sans is really, really, really difficult in terms of having extremely high reaction time required for some of his attack patterns, compared to Jevil, which, on paper, isn't really that bad. But the thing is, Sans is arguably a harder casual boss to beat, because all of his attacks hit harder. You can only either attack or, heal. And one of the main biggest differences between Jevil and Sans is Jevil actually takes damage. So, if you look at some of the bosses like Sans, every single time you attack him, he will just dodge the attack. And basically, you have to attack him X number of times, and he has to keep dodging, and every single time you attack him, he shoots out another line of dialogue, like exposition, whatever, and he attacks you back. You do this over and over and over until finally you reach his final attack, and then you win the fight. So your damage output is effectively non-existent. You don't need to worry about actually landing damage on him, so that removes partially an element of skill to the fight. You don't need to line up your attack patterns properly, but also it means the fight is 100% consistent because you cannot DPS race through Sans. There's only one way to approach the fight. The mechanics are tuned around you having to either choose to survive another turn by healing or landing an additional attack on Sans. Because of the way Jevil is tuned, you can effectively ignore the part of the fight where you were intended to heal and just not get hit and put out even more damage. So, one thing you'll notice here is I'm going to show that there's a few attack patterns on Jevil that I never got to see on this kill. I've seen it, of course, a million times before because I've done this fight, I don't even know how many times. But the reason that I never got to see these attack patterns on my kill is because the way that I geared up my characters over this playthrough, which I did years ago and then I've just been reusing the same save file, I made it so Susie, the one in the middle, deals so much damage that I'm able to burn through all of his, mechanics in the later part of the fight. I'm effectively hitting the last 10% of the boss before he actually reaches the hard phases, which in some ways does make this a little bit easier, but it also makes it a bit unpredictable. Depending on how much damage I'm able to do to Jevil, he might have additional mechanics. If I take too long, he gets another phase, which is arguably much harder than the rest. It's a very, very weird boss in that regard, compared to Sans, which is very tightly tuned. But it does allow for these types of cool strategies where you can just effectively DPS race him. There's also another strategy that you can do with Jevil where you basically use these actions to slow him down. And it's kind of hard to say whether or not this is easier, per se, because it does slow Jevils' attack patterns where the projectiles move at a, easier to dodge pace, but because this one is actually tuned around having a fixed completion time like Sans, it means that you basically get every single one of the attack patterns that you're intended to get. So, the TLDR of Jevil, at least on this challenge, is if you're trying to beat him with the slow mode, you're going to have to deal with as many attack patterns as normal, but it's going to be easier to dodge each individual attack pattern. With the one I did, the attack mode, you might be able to out DPS him and skip some of his later attack patterns, but, it's going to be really hard. All of these projectiles fly extremely quickly. It's a bit of a rough fight. The biggest problem that I have with this boss, overall, is the RNG inherent within it. Now, that's not to say that it's a completely random boss. Of course, at the end of the day, most of the dodging comes down to skill, and I would be lying if I said that, 9 out of 10 times, it wasn't just me fucking up that ended up losing the run. A lot of times I think I'm out of something, I hit the wrong key, and then boom, I get clipped ever so slightly by one of the projectiles, and I'm like, god damn it. I still think at the end of the day that is my fault. That being said, there are a lot of attack patterns on this fight that are really, really, really unpredictable. You can go through an entire fight of Sans, and it's just not going to be random at all. Every single one of his attacks is completely deterministic. There's only one section later on that is slightly random, in the sense where Sans will select like 2 out of 4 of random attacks to throw at you, but each one of those individual attacks is isolated. So there's no overlaps or something where one attack leads poorly into another. It's just, it sequences these attacks in a different order, and each one of those individual attacks has no RNG inherent within it. So Sans is hard, but it's consistent. So my feeling with Sans is that once I actually finalize the strategies that I need to learn for some of the attack patterns that I'm still struggling a little bit with, I should be able to get a kill relatively quickly. Because I'm familiar with most of the fight, it's just 1 or 2 things that I haven't fully nailed down yet. But Jevil, I've learned a while ago. I've known all of his attack patterns and how to properly dodge them for a very, very long time. The struggle with Jevil is actually managing to get all of his attack patterns to not fuck you over. Because sometimes you just get a near impossible pattern, and it's brutal. And then you're, 5 minutes into a fight, and you're done. Honestly, I don't want to go into literally every single attack, but one of the ones that I will mention, because god do I hate it, is the heart attack, which is literally the 3rd attack that Jevil uses. And this means that I've lost a ton of runs early on to this thing, because it's just so inconsistent and so hard to properly dodge it, because the movement on it, like, it randomly speeds up and slows down. It sometimes will target you from across the screen, and sometimes just kind of do its own thing. It's really, really, really hard to predict where it's going, and sometimes if the hearts aren't lined up properly and they're rotating in like opposite directions, it can just create like this impassable death wall, and you just sit there and go, well, I guess I'm fucked. And that attack especially, I think, is representative of what a lot of the attack patterns in Jevil can do to you, where you're doing really well and then suddenly you're staring down this blanket wall of projectiles heading right for you, and you're like, fuck? And I'm sure in those cases, if I were to slow down time and do like pixel perfect movements to find that tiny little gap between the projectiles that I could slide through, maybe I could dodge it, but that's just one of those things where I don't think it's feasible for, the average human. Overall, I do want to say that I think this is a fun boss, and Deltarune as a whole, I think, is a very fun game. I don't know if I'm necessarily going to try to one-hit the other Deltarune bosses, because the fact of life is that Jevil is the only truly difficult one. The other bosses are more just mild inconveniences. Obviously, when Deltarune finally comes out, I'm going to be playing this. People have speculated it's going to be this year. We'll see. I would be super excited if it is. But yeah, this game is something that I absolutely love, and this is a boss that I've been working on for a while. Is it 3 years late? Yeah, sure. It's 3 years late. Has this been done a million times before? Sure. It's been done a million times before. But hey, I did it. This is my YouTube channel. I'm proud of an accomplishment that I've been working on for a while, so I just wanted to share that, and I just wanted to talk about this boss fight that I think is really interesting, especially compared to some of the other boss fights within its own series. So, just wanted to talk about that. Didn't really expect this to be today's video, because every morning I put in like at least 5 attempts, and well, this happened to be one of them, so worked out well. Definitely have more World of Warcraft stuff coming up. I was working on editing a Warcraft Logs video, if you were there on the stream, and that'll be coming out soon. So stay tuned for that. I should also say, if you are not subscribed to the channel, then I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe. Helps me grow, means a lot. If you're already subscribed, I appreciate you too. But that's it for me. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.